The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the jagged canyons and windswept plains of the borderlands. The horizon shimmered in heat, and the scent of sagebrush mixed with the dry dust rising from the cracked earth. In this unforgiving landscape, survival was measured in seconds and skill, and the law was little more than rumor carried by the wind. Into this harsh world fled Ayita, a young Apache girl of 19, her small frame barely able to move through the rough terrain. Her eyes, dark and wary, darted from one shadow to another, scanning for threats. Her once bright hair was matted and dusty, her clothes torn from running through brush and brambles, but it was her resolve that truly marked her. Grief had hardened her, but it had not broken her spirit. Ayita's family had been scattered in a brutal clash with settlers claiming her tribe's ancestral lands. The massacre had left her alone, carrying only the memories of her parents and the weight of inherited responsibility. She knew the land she ran across was more than soil. It was legacy, culture, and life itself, and yet now it had become a death trap. Bounty hunters, hardened men with cold eyes and sharper weapons, were pursuing her, drawn by greed and the promise of reward. Every snap of a twig underfoot, every rustle in the scrub made her heart lurch. Each moment stretched endlessly as the sun began to bleed toward the horizon, turning the sky a mix of crimson and copper. Finally, Ayita stumbled upon the ranch. Its fences were crude but imposing, the wooden posts bleached by sun and wind. Smoke rose lazily from a stone chimney, and the lowing of cattle suggested life, yet also the presence of someone formidable. From the porch, Gideon Colt emerged. He was a man who seemed carved from the land itself, his skin tanned and weathered, arms strong from decades of toil, eyes sharp and assessing. He carried the air of authority and danger. Legends of his ruthlessness traveled far and wide. He was known as a man who would enforce justice with iron fists, who would not hesitate to kill if he deemed it necessary. Yet something about the stance he assumed hinted at layers hidden beneath the surface, an unspoken history that had tempered his harshness with the faintest trace of morality. Ayita's lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, just make it fast." The words carried more than fear. They were a plea for release, a request for agency in a world where she had little control. She expected violence. She expected cruelty. She did not expect hesitation. Time seemed to stretch. The wind shifted, rattling the fence posts and stirring dust into whirling patterns around her. The distant howl of a coyote echoed through the canyons, and birds startled from a nearby tree, their wings flapping wildly. Gideon's eyes did not blink. He measured the girl not as prey, not as a threat, but as a human being on the edge of despair. In his mind, he calculated every possible outcome. He could turn her away, leaving her to face certain death. He could follow the bounty hunter's code, claiming the reward, or he could act on the faint, lingering empathy that had survived decades of frontier brutality. Finally, he did the unthinkable. His hand, calloused and rough, relaxed around the butt of his rifle. Instead of taking aim, he took a step forward. Ayita's eyes widened with disbelief. Her body stiffened. "Why?" she breathed, voice shaking. It was as if the wind had paused in reverence to the moment. A tableau frozen in time. A young girl on the run, desperate and weary, and a rancher who defied expectation. Gideon's voice was low, almost gentle, yet carried authority. "You have a choice," he said. "I won't harm you, but you need to decide what you'll do next." The words were simple, but for Ayita, they carried the weight of an entire world she thought had been stripped away. She had expected force, betrayal, and cruelty. What she received instead was a strange and terrifying freedom. The narrative pauses here to linger on the internal states of both characters. Ayita feels a torrent of conflicting emotions: relief, confusion, suspicion, and a fragile hope. Trust does not come easily to someone who has witnessed the destruction of her family. She wonders what motive Gideon could have for sparing her. Is he testing her? Is this some twisted form of manipulation? And yet the absence of immediate threat gives her a chance to breathe, to reclaim a measure of control. Gideon, on the other hand, confronts his own contradictions. He has lived by rules etched in survival and pragmatism, by the frontier code of harsh justice. But in this fleeting moment, he faces a choice that transcends law or reward. There is something about Ayita's resilience, her raw humanity, and her quiet strength that touches a part of him long suppressed. He sees a reflection of the struggles he has endured, the loneliness of life on this vast, unforgiving land. His decision is not moral in the conventional sense, it is instinctual, an act of empathy in a world where empathy is scarce. The physical environment mirrors their inner turmoil. Dust swirls around their boots, sunlight glances off the weathered fence posts, and the landscape stretches wide and dangerous beyond them. Every sensory detail reinforces the tension and uncertainty. The reader can feel the grit of the earth, the sharpness of the wind, the sun's burning heat, and the palpable pause between two lives intersecting in a critical moment. Aita eventually accepts his offer, though cautiously. She moves closer, never fully lowering her guard. Every step is measured, every glance careful. Gideon does not rush her, does not speak more than necessary. The alliance is uneasy from the start, one built not on friendship but on mutual necessity. She needs protection from the bounty hunters who pursue her. He, for reasons he cannot fully articulate, feels compelled to ensure her safety. Their partnership is fragile, balanced on the thin line between survival and betrayal. This encounter establishes the key themes that will drive the story. Survival against overwhelming odds, the complexity of human morality in a lawless world, and the tension between fear and trust. It also begins the transformation of the characters. Aita's initial perception of the frontier as solely dangerous and cruel is challenged by Gideon's unexpected mercy. Gideon's hardened exterior, built over decades of violence and solitude, is softened by an act of compassion that may have far-reaching consequences. The cinematic quality of this outline is crucial. The dusty wind, the dying sunlight, the tension in the air, the juxtaposition of youth and experience, desperation and moral choice, all serve to immerse the reader. Each moment is described with attention to detail, the texture of the dust, the shifting patterns of sunlight and shadow, the sound of distant wildlife, the weight of weapons, and the tremor of human emotion. This grounding in sensory detail heightens the realism and draws the reader directly into the moment. By the end of this outline, the foundation for the story is solid. Two characters from different worlds and with different stakes are brought together by circumstance. The encounter foreshadows the challenges to come, navigating trust, confronting danger, and facing internal and external conflicts that will test both Aita and Gideon. Their relationship begins with tension and wariness, but the spark of connection, fragile, uncertain, and profoundly human, is established. This opening also sets up narrative threads to be explored in subsequent outlines. The pursuit of bounty hunters, the secrets hidden in Aita's past, Gideon's own history and motivations, and the ethical dilemmas that will arise as they traverse the perilous frontier. By combining rich historical detail, psychological depth, and cinematic storytelling, this outline fulfills the first act of the narrative while providing a strong emotional hook for readers to continue. The morning after the initial encounter, the borderlands awaken to the chorus of life and danger. Birds chatter from the scrub while the wind carries dust and dry leaves across the rugged plains. Gideon Colt wakes before dawn, his sleep troubled by decades of harsh experiences and the responsibility he now feels toward Aita. He moves with the familiarity of a man accustomed to hard labor, checking his weapons, saddling his horse, and preparing for the day. Each movement is deliberate, the weight of survival etched into his muscle memory. Aita, on the other hand, is barely awake. Her fear of betrayal makes it impossible for her to relax completely, even in the relative safety of Gideon's ranch. She sits quietly in a corner of the cabin, her gaze distant, her mind replaying the horrors she has faced and the peril that still lurks beyond the fence. Every creak of the wooden floorboards makes her flinch. The reader is made acutely aware of her constant vigilance, the psychological scars of trauma that guide her every action. Gideon approaches her cautiously. He understands the necessity of patience. Trust cannot be forced. "We need to move," he says, his voice calm but firm. "The bounty hunters won't give up easily, and staying here will only make it worse." Aita nods, though silently. She is aware that she must rely on him, at least temporarily. Yet her instinct for survival keeps her wary. She sizes him up. He could be a threat, a savior, or something in between. The tension is tangible, a fragile line between cooperation and conflict. The journey begins at first light. The landscape is unforgiving. Jagged rocks, sudden ravines, and sparse vegetation provide both obstacles and camouflage. Gideon leads, scanning the horizon for danger. Aida follows close behind, her senses sharpened by years of survival on the run. The narrative dwells on the minutiae of travel in the frontier, the sound of hooves clattering over stones, the dry wind whipping dust into their faces, the subtle rustle of animals signaling potential threats. Every detail immerses the reader in the harshness of the terrain and the constant vigilance required to survive. Conflict emerges almost immediately. The bounty hunters tracking Aida appear as dark silhouettes on a distant ridge. They are armed, ruthless, and determined. Gideon's experience becomes apparent as he scouts a safer path through the cliffs, using the natural landscape to shield their movement. Aida, though frightened, demonstrates resourcefulness and courage. She identifies hidden paths, observes signs of human activity, and helps navigate around dangerous terrain. This interplay emphasizes that their survival depends not on strength alone, but on intelligence, intuition, and cooperation. During moments of relative safety, the narrative delves deeper into character development. Aida begins to glimpse layers of Gideon's personality beyond the reputation of cruelty. He is disciplined, pragmatic, but also capable of subtle acts of kindness. For example, he shares water sparingly, distributes food with consideration, and at times, offers protective gestures that are small but meaningful. A steady hand on her shoulder when crossing a rickety bridge, a warning to duck when an arrow narrowly misses a nearby tree. These actions speak louder than words, demonstrating that human morality can survive even in a world that rewards violence. Gideon, meanwhile, observes Aida closely. He recognizes a strength in her that is tempered by fear, an intelligence sharpened by survival, and a stubbornness rooted in loyalty to her family's memory. Her silence is not mere submission. It is a calculated observation, a shield against betrayal. He understands that forcing trust would be pointless. He must earn it through consistent protection and demonstration of reliability. Their alliance is symbiotic. She needs him to survive the immediate threats. He needs her insights and awareness to navigate a perilous frontier that even he cannot dominate alone. Along the way, they encounter natural obstacles that heighten tension. A sudden flash flood forces them to seek higher ground, testing their endurance and adaptability. A wild animal, perhaps a mountain lion or wolf, crosses their path, forcing Gideon to demonstrate skill and courage to protect Aida. Each encounter is not just action for spectacle, but a metaphor for the dangers of their environment and the fragility of trust. These trials also allow the reader to witness how their reliance on each other deepens, slowly transforming mutual wariness into cautious respect. The dialogue between them is minimal but loaded with meaning. Words are weighed carefully. Silence often speaks louder than speech. At one point, Aida challenges Gideon's assumptions. "You think I'm helpless," she says quietly, "but I've survived worse than you can imagine." Gideon, in turn, is forced to reflect on his own assumptions about the frontier, justice, and morality. He begins to question the rigid codes he has lived by, realizing that compassion and cooperation can coexist with toughness. This tension between old beliefs and new experiences becomes a central theme, highlighting the complexity of human morality on the frontier. As night falls, they make camp in a secluded canyon. A fire flickers, casting long shadows over their faces. The narrative dwells on small, intimate details: the smell of smoke mingling with the scent of the earth, the warmth of the fire against the chill night air, the quiet sounds of nocturnal creatures. Around the fire, Aida cautiously begins to share fragments of her story, memories of her family, glimpses of her tribe, hints at her knowledge of hidden trails and safe havens. Gideon listens, not interrupting, offering small gestures of acknowledgement. Trust, while still tentative, begins to germinate in the fertile soil of shared hardship. The night also provides space for internal reflection. Gideon thinks back to his own life, years of solitude, moral compromises, and the hardening of his soul in response to frontier brutality. Aida's presence challenges him, igniting a protective instinct he had thought long buried. For Aida, Gideon represents a paradox, a potential ally, a source of safety, and yet still a figure of uncertainty and power she cannot fully understand or control. The narrative emphasizes the tension between fear, hope, and the necessity of cooperation. By the end of Outline 2, their alliance is established, though it remains fragile. They have faced immediate dangers together, survived treacherous terrain, and begun to understand glimpses of each other's character. Their relationship is a delicate balance of trust, respect, and wariness, framed against the unforgiving frontier landscape. The stakes are higher than before. Bounty hunters remain on their trail, the terrain itself is hostile, and the moral dilemmas they face are just beginning to surface. This outline is crucial because it transitions the story from the initial encounter to the development of a partnership. It establishes character depth, builds tension, and provides a sense of forward momentum. Every trial, obstacle, and quiet moment contributes to the emerging bond between Aita and Gideon, setting the stage for more complex interactions and moral dilemmas in the following outlines. Cinematically, this outline is rich, sweeping vistas of canyons and plains, narrow passes threatening to collapse underfoot, firelight flickering on weary faces, and the ever-present tension of unseen enemies. The sensory details, scent, sound, temperature, and texture, immerse the reader fully in the experience of frontier survival. Emotional stakes are layered atop physical danger, creating a multi-dimensional narrative that resonates with realism, tension, and empathy. By the conclusion of Outline 2, the reader understands the complexity of the frontier world, the fragile beginnings of trust between two unlikely allies, and the moral ambiguity that drives the story. This sets up Outline 3, where the partnership is tested further, secrets emerge, and the consequences of their decisions begin to ripple outward, escalating the stakes and deepening the narrative tension. The early morning sky is tinged with pale amber as Aita and Gideon break camp. The wind is cold against their faces, carrying the scent of sage and distant pine. Each is wrapped in the weight of their own history. Aita, still wary, moves with quiet efficiency, packing her few belongings while keeping a keen eye on the horizon. The trauma of her past has trained her senses to detect even the faintest shift in the environment. The crack of a branch, a distant footstep, the flutter of a bird disturbed too suddenly. Every detail matters because any miscalculation could mean death. Gideon, observing her from a short distance, notes her precision and caution. He recognizes in her the sharp instincts of someone who has survived by wit, agility, and intuition. At the same time, he reflects on his own life, the compromises he has made, the ruthless decisions that secured his survival, and the loneliness that comes from a life hardened by harsh landscapes and harder choices. The narrative emphasizes the contrast between them, her youth tempered by fear and experience, his age hardened by knowledge and moral ambiguity. As they travel, Gideon notices signs that bounty hunters are nearby. A broken twig here, footprints in soft soil there, the distant glint of metal that suggests weapons. He warns Aita, and they take a detour through narrow passes and hidden ravines, relying on both his experience and her instinct. During these moments, tension simmers beneath the surface. Though they work together, neither fully trusts the other. Aita fears betrayal. Gideon fears being manipulated or outwitted by someone desperate and skilled. The frontier is unforgiving, and every decision carries weighty consequences. Their conversations, when they occur, are minimal but significant. At one point, Aita challenges Gideon's methods. "You move like the hunters know you're coming," she says, her eyes scanning the horizon. "You can't fight them all if they find us." Gideon, silent at first, replies with measured caution. "Experience has a way of teaching survival and patience." Their dialogue reflects not only tactical considerations but also underlying power dynamics. Who leads? Who observes? Who decides? Trust is negotiated in small increments, through action, observation, and choice rather than through words alone. The first true test comes when they stumble upon a concealed Apache settlement. Aita's face changes at the sight. Memory, recognition, and longing flash across her expression. She knows the land intimately, understands its hidden paths, and knows the dangers it conceals. But Gideon is unaware of the spiritual and cultural significance of these grounds. Aita hesitates, weighing the risk of revealing her knowledge and heritage. The settlement is a potential refuge but also a liability. If the bounty hunters track them here, lives could be lost. Here, the narrative deepens Aita's character. She has responsibilities beyond survival. She carries the weight of her tribe's traditions, sacred sites, and the memory of a family decimated by conflict. Her secret, knowledge of hidden lands, becomes a source of inner tension. Should she share this with Gideon, trusting him to respect her heritage, or keep it hidden, risking their immediate survival but preserving sacred knowledge? The decision underscores the theme of secrecy and moral responsibility that pervades the story. Gideon, meanwhile, begins to reveal fragments of his past, though selectively. He speaks of past conflicts with other ranchers, of moral compromises he made in the pursuit of land and survival, and of decisions that haunt him even today. These confessions are cautious, revealing vulnerability without fully exposing him. For Aida, these stories are unsettling. They challenge her assumptions about human nature, morality, and the supposed cruelty of settlers. She sees complexity in Gideon, a man capable of violence yet restrained by principles, ruthless yet capable of mercy. Their tentative trust is shattered when the bounty hunters catch up. A skirmish erupts in a narrow canyon with arrows whistling and bullets ricocheting off rocks. Gideon's combat skills and strategic mind become evident. He positions Aida behind cover, returns fire when necessary, and navigates the terrain with deadly precision. Aida, despite fear, contributes her knowledge of ambush tactics, signaling paths and traps that could confuse their pursuers. Together they fend off the attackers, yet the encounter leaves both shaken. The narrative highlights how high-stakes conflict both tests and strengthens bonds, forcing characters to confront their reliance on one another. Amid the chaos, a perceived betrayal occurs. A miscommunication leads Aida to believe Gideon prioritized his own safety over hers, striking a blow to the fragile trust they have built. She recoils, questioning whether his earlier mercy was genuine or merely tactical. Gideon, for his part, is frustrated and hurt by her suspicion, but understands the root of her mistrust. It is a survival mechanism honed by trauma. This moment of emotional intensity deepens character complexity. Trust is fragile, and past trauma can distort perception, even in the face of genuine care. The aftermath of the battle is quiet, but intense. They take refuge in a hidden ravine, tending minor wounds and catching their breath. The silence between them is loaded with unspoken questions and tentative understanding. Here the story emphasizes the moral ambiguity of the frontier. Decisions must be made in moments of life or death urgency, and consequences, physical, emotional, and ethical, linger long after immediate threats have passed. During this time, Aida finally reveals a key secret: the location of sacred Apache lands that her family once protected. She explains the significance of these sites, their spiritual and historical importance, and why they must remain hidden from outsiders. Gideon listens, absorbing not only the tactical value but also the moral weight of her disclosure. He recognizes that their journey is no longer just about survival. It is about respect, heritage, and the ethical responsibility of safeguarding what is sacred. This revelation deepens their bond. It forces Gideon to confront his own assumptions, prejudices, and responsibilities. Aida's willingness to share such intimate knowledge marks a tentative step toward trust, while Gideon's response, care, protection, and careful consideration, demonstrates his evolving morality. Their alliance transforms from mere necessity into a partnership with ethical dimension. Though trust is still tested constantly, the outline also emphasizes setting as a reflection of internal states. The rugged canyons mirror the characters' emotional barriers. Sudden storms reflect turmoil and unpredictability. Quiet nights by the fire allow reflection, planning, and tentative understanding. The narrative uses natural metaphors to reinforce themes of survival, morality, and the fragile emergence of trust. By the end of Outline 3, their journey becomes more than survival. It becomes a test of character, values, and morality. Hidden truths and perceived betrayals threaten to unravel their fragile alliance, yet shared experiences and the necessity of survival force them to adapt, reconsider, and sometimes forgive. The stage is set for further exploration of personal history, loyalty, and ethical dilemmas, raising the stakes for the next part of the story. Cinematically, Outline 3 is vivid, sweeping canyon vistas, the tension of ambushes, the interplay of firelight and shadow, and the harsh textures of the frontier landscape. Every sensory detail, the smell of dust and smoke, the tang of blood in the air, the echoing silence after combat, immerses the reader in the intensity of both physical and emotional experiences. The frontier is no longer merely a backdrop. It is an active participant in the narrative, shaping choices, testing courage, and influencing morality. The sun is merciless, blazing overhead as Gideon and Aita navigate the jagged terrain of the western frontier. Their journey has brought them far from the relative safety of Gideon's ranch into a landscape where cliffs and canyons dominate the horizon. The wind cuts across the rocks, carrying dust and the faint scent of distant pine, while the shriek of a hawk echoes overhead, a reminder that predators exist not only in human form. Both are exhausted, their bodies battered from previous skirmishes and long days on horseback. Yet the stakes have never been higher. The bounty hunters and rival settlers are closing in, and the terrain itself becomes an additional adversary. They approach a narrow canyon pass, one that offers potential concealment, but also limits mobility. The walls rise steeply on either side, jagged and rough, creating shadows that shift with the movement of the sun. It is here that the rival faction ambushes them. Armed men emerge from hidden crevices and behind rocks, rifles glinting in the sunlight. The air fills with tension, the clatter of metal, the thud of hooves, and the sharp, panicked breaths of Aita. For a moment, time seems suspended. The canyon itself appears alive, echoing with the threat of imminent violence. Gideon assesses the situation swiftly. The narrow pass means that movement is limited, escape nearly impossible. The men are well armed and coordinated, and their intentions are clear. They will kill anyone who interferes with their claim to the land or the bounty on Aita's head. He understands that conventional combat will not suffice. A direct confrontation would result in mutual destruction. Here the narrative emphasizes Gideon's tactical intelligence and experience, contrasting with Aita's agility, intuition, and knowledge of hidden pathways. Survival depends not only on skill but also on a moral reckoning that neither has faced before. Aita, recognizing the imminent danger, instinctively reaches for her bow, a relic of her family and a symbol of her people's heritage. Her hands shake slightly, betraying both fear and determination. The moment is cinematic, her dark eyes scanning every angle, muscles coiled for action, hair whipping in the canyon wind. She understands the stakes. One wrong move could cost both of them their lives. But beyond survival, the situation raises a moral question. Is it possible to protect oneself without compromising principles? She recalls the lessons of her family, the sacred lands they protected, and the code of honor that guided her tribe. Gideon, meanwhile, faces his own moral dilemma. He could abandon Aita, flee, or negotiate with the attackers, but each choice carries profound consequences. His reputation as a ruthless rancher has conditioned him to prioritize self-preservation, yet the loyalty and bond he has formed with Aita now challenge that instinct. The narrative delves into his internal struggle, the calculation of risk, the recognition of human life beyond the frontier's brutal rules, and the contemplation of a choice that defies conventional morality. The tension escalates when one of the attackers recognizes Gideon, revealing a history of grudges and previous conflicts. The rival faction sees him not merely as an obstacle, but as a symbol of past betrayals and frontier justice. The stakes become personal. Every movement, glance, and decision is now amplified by past grievances and immediate danger. Aita watches Gideon assessing his reactions, weighing whether trust is still possible in the face of overwhelming threat. The unthinkable choice arrives when the attackers demand a sacrifice. One of them must submit, or both will die. The narrative explores the physical and emotional gravity of this moment. Gideon instinctively steps forward, shielding Aita with his body, but he hesitates, knowing that his action could provoke immediate violence. Aita, simultaneously terrified and resolute, understands that the decision is not only about survival but about identity, loyalty, and the moral consequences of the act. Gideon's internal dialogue is central here. He reflects on the frontier code he has lived by. A world where might often makes right, where survival frequently necessitates betrayal. Yet now, confronted with Aita's vulnerability and his own moral compass, he questions whether adherence to that code is worth human life. His decision is not guided solely by strategy but by empathy, conscience, and the bond he has reluctantly formed with the girl. This moment crystallizes one of the story's core themes: the possibility of moral choice even in an environment designed to crush morality. Aita's perspective also deepens. She perceives the complexity of human nature through Gideon's hesitation and resolve. She understands that the frontier is a place of harsh survival, yet also recognizes the capacity for moral courage. Her own decision, to act, to stay, or to influence the outcome, is intertwined with her trust in him and her commitment to her own principles. The narrative emphasizes the psychological weight of choice, portraying the human mind under extreme stress, where every action reverberates with consequences. The standoff reaches its peak when Gideon takes the unthinkable step. In a calculated yet morally courageous act, he offers himself as a diversion to allow Aita a chance to escape. He negotiates with the attackers, leveraging both his reputation and his tactical knowledge to create a narrow window for action. The cinematic detail here is vivid. Dust swirling around their boots, the glint of rifles in sunlight, the creaking of the canyon walls, the tension in Aita's bow hand, and the subtle shifts in Gideon's posture as he risks everything. Aita, empowered by Gideon's sacrifice, acts decisively. She navigates the canyon's hidden paths, using knowledge of terrain to evade pursuers, and realizes the weight of responsibility in her hands. This act of survival is not merely physical but moral. She honors Gideon's choice, preserves life, and asserts agency over her own destiny. Meanwhile, Gideon faces direct danger, demonstrating skill, courage, and the depth of his ethical resolve. The aftermath of the unthinkable choice is emotionally charged. Aita emerges from the canyon breathless but alive, understanding the profound significance of what has occurred. Gideon's actions, whether visible or hidden, embody the story's thematic core, the collision of morality, survival, and trust in an unforgiving world. The narrative dwells on the psychological and emotional consequences of the encounter, the fear, the relief, the lingering sense of responsibility, and the shift in their relationship. Through this ordeal, the bond between Aita and Gideon transforms. Trust, previously tentative and tested by minor skirmishes, now deepens into respect forged in extreme circumstances. Each character understands the moral complexity of the other. Aita recognizes Gideon's capacity for courage and selflessness, while Gideon acknowledges Aita's intelligence, bravery, and moral discernment. The unthinkable choice cements their alliance, laying the foundation for shared purpose beyond survival, protection, loyalty, and the preservation of sacred knowledge. The setting enhances the cinematic intensity of Outline 4. The narrow canyon, the swirling dust, the blinding sun, and the echo of distant threats all contribute to a sensory-rich tableau. Every environmental element amplifies tension, mirrors emotional stakes, and reinforces themes of danger, moral ambiguity, and courage. The frontier is both a character and a crucible, testing human limits in every dimension. By the conclusion of Outline 4, the story reaches a pivotal turning point. Gideon and Aita survive the immediate threat, but the moral and emotional consequences of their choices linger. Their journey is no longer merely about evading bounty hunters or traversing hostile terrain. It has become a narrative about courage, ethical responsibility, and the transformative power of trust forged in extremity. They emerge not only as survivors, but as partners in a moral and physical journey that challenges both human instinct and human conscience. This outline sets up the final narrative arc, where the consequences of their choices, the weight of secrets, and the tension between moral responsibility and survival will culminate. The characters are now bonded through shared trauma, mutual respect, and the experience of having faced the unthinkable together. The stage is ready for resolution, confrontation, and ultimate reckoning in Outline 5. The morning breaks with a crisp light over the rugged plains, the sun climbing slowly above the horizon. Gideon and Aita, having survived ambushes and life-threatening decisions, are exhausted yet resolute. The previous ordeal in the canyon pass has left both physically and emotionally drained. Dust clings to their skin. Their clothes are torn and every muscle aches from days of riding, climbing, and fleeing. Yet the most profound exhaustion is psychological, a weight born of moral decisions and the knowledge that their survival depended on courage, ingenuity, and trust. The frontier around them is unforgiving, a land of jagged cliffs, shifting streams, and vast plains that seem to stretch endlessly. The landscape is both a threat and a sanctuary, echoing their internal struggle. Nature is indifferent to human concerns. Every path offers potential danger. Every shadow may conceal an enemy. The sensory details, the sharp scent of sage, the dry wind carrying dust, the distant cry of wolves, immerse the reader in the intensity of the setting, reinforcing the themes of survival and human resilience. The story reaches its climax when Gideon and Aida encounter the final remnants of the bounty hunters and rival settlers. These men, having regrouped after previous skirmishes, seek revenge and control over the lands and the Apache girl. The narrative builds tension by describing the ambush from multiple perspectives. The hunter's anticipation, Gideon's strategic mind calculating probabilities and risks, and Aida's acute awareness of terrain and movement. The confrontation is as much psychological as it is physical, a test of wit, courage, and moral resolve. The fight unfolds in cinematic detail. Gideon uses the terrain to his advantage, directing Aida to hidden positions while he engages in calculated maneuvers. Aida, relying on her tribal knowledge and instinct, anticipates the hunter's moves, guiding Gideon with silent gestures and whispered warnings. The narrative lingers on sensory elements: the clatter of boots on rocks, the whistle of arrows, the smell of smoke and gunpowder, the thud of bullets against wood and stone. Every moment heightens the stakes, making the reader feel the peril alongside the characters. During the conflict, the themes of trust and partnership are fully realized. Aida's quick thinking and knowledge of the land prevent a potentially deadly ambush, while Gideon's experience and tactical skill counter the hunter's numerical advantage. Their coordination, honed through prior trials, demonstrates the depth of their bond. The narrative emphasizes that their survival is not due to physical prowess alone, but to the merging of intellect, instinct, and mutual trust. Amid the chaos, Gideon makes a decisive, morally driven choice. He spares a bounty hunter who had previously caused him personal harm, demonstrating that courage and morality can coexist even in a violent and lawless world. Aida witnesses this act and understands its significance, recognizing that mercy and honor are as vital as strength and strategy. This moment underscores one of the story's central themes. Ethical choices define human character, even when survival is at stake. With the immediate threat neutralized, the narrative shifts to the aftermath. Both characters are physically battered but alive, their bond stronger and tempered by shared trials. They assess the damage, tend minor wounds, and reflect on what they have endured. The emotional weight of their journey is palpable: relief, grief for those lost, and the slow emergence of hope. The story emphasizes their inner transformation. Aida's trust has deepened, and Gideon's understanding of moral courage has evolved. The resolution also addresses the preservation of heritage and culture. Aida leads Gideon to a sacred site, a hidden valley that has remained untouched by settlers. The narrative details the site with reverence. Ancient trees, a clear spring, and rock formations marked with symbols of her ancestors. This place represents not only survival but continuity, culture, and identity. Gideon's reaction is one of respect and awe, signaling his growth from a pragmatic rancher to a guardian of something larger than himself. Their survival is now intertwined with a higher purpose: protection of the sacred, preservation of culture, and respect for history. The narrative explores the psychological and moral consequences of the journey. Both characters reflect on the choices made, the unthinkable sacrifices, the decisions to act or remain passive, and the moments of mercy that defined their path. Aida considers the complexity of human morality, understanding that even those with a violent reputation can act with integrity. Gideon reflects on the meaning of courage and responsibility, realizing that protecting others and honoring ethical principles can redefine his life's purpose. Cinematic elements continue to enhance the storytelling. The valley is bathed in golden light as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the landscape. Dust rises from the earth as they walk, the wind whispering through trees and water sparkles in the spring. Every detail, the texture of the rocks, the sound of flowing water, the warmth of sunlight on skin, serves to immerse the reader in a vivid tableau of relief, resolution, and quiet triumph. The visual imagery reinforces the themes of survival, cultural continuity, and the human capacity for moral courage. By the end of Outline 5, the story reaches emotional and narrative closure. Gideon and Aida have survived external threats, confronted internal fears, and navigated moral dilemmas. Their bond is strong, forged in trust, mutual respect, and shared experience. The frontier, once a symbol of danger and lawlessness, becomes a backdrop for moral reflection, growth, and the possibility of a new beginning. The resolution also leaves space for future possibilities. While immediate dangers have passed, the narrative hints at ongoing challenges: protecting sacred lands, confronting new threats, and continuing personal growth. This open-ended quality allows the story to feel complete yet alive, reflecting the ongoing nature of moral and physical struggles in a harsh world. In conclusion, Outline 5 provides a satisfying resolution to the story. It resolves the central conflict, showcases the characters' growth, and emphasizes the themes of trust, morality, survival, and cultural preservation. The combination of intense action, moral complexity, rich character development, and cinematic description ensures a compelling, emotionally resonant finale. Readers leave with a sense of completion, empathy for the characters, and reflection on the ethical challenges inherent in life on the frontier.